Coming up next on Headline Humboldt, desperation.
Suspend Measure S! Suspend Measure S! Suspend Measure S!
Cannabis farmers and members of the broader community this week crowded in front of the Humboldt County Courthouse to demand that supervisors suspend the Measure S tax on cannabis cultivation and help save their industry. Also, Omicron continues its exponential spread across the region as the federal government takes steps to provide tests to anyone who needs them. Coming up next. Live from the top of Humboldt Hill, this is Headline Humboldt. I'm James Falk. Thanks for joining us. After 18 months of doing everything possible to protect myself, my family, my friends, and my co-workers, my family spent the better part of the last month in the throes of COVID-19. Bedridden and coughing, anxious each and every moment that any one of us might take a sudden turn for the worst. Whether it was the slightly less severe nature of Omicron or the fact that we'd all been vaccinated or even both, we can report now that such a wicked turn never happened. But we were scared. Both my wife and I had moments in the midst of our infection when we understood how dangerous this disease could be and how absolutely lucky we were to not be deathly ill. I'm here now to express gratitude to all the doctors, scientists, and experts who have worked nonstop these last 2 years to develop a vaccine and a knowledge base that gives us all an informed shot at beating this illness, whether it infects us or the people we love. I'd also like to thank Eric Black, who ably sat in the anchor's seat these past 2 weeks and delivered the news with gravitas and professionalism. Through this traumatic experience, coupled with all the other seemingly endless crises facing our world politically and environmentally, it becomes clear to me that we're all on the edge of a major social upheaval whose ultimate resolution is still in the offing. In one form or another, we will survive all of these challenges. We can either absorb the necessary lessons, learn to work better together, and become a better world, or all these crises will continue to weaken our foundations and broaden the already gaping fault lines. On this show, I've tried to cover the issues that I believe will define us, from the teetering of democratic norms and rampant racism to the expansion of misinformation and misunderstanding. We all have choices to make, and what we decide to do will say everything about who and what we are as people and as a community. Now, one way we set priorities comes through political representation and how those representatives choose to support industries of the future. This past week, scores of people gathered on the courthouse steps to demand that the Humboldt County Board of Supervisors suspend Measure S ahead of the March 15th due date for county cultivation taxes. Organizers say the wholesale price of cannabis has plummeted post-legalization due to oversupply and prohibitive taxation, including the Humboldt County cultivation tax, which is based on the square footage of allowable grow space. This marijuana tax is paid even if no cannabis is produced or sold and does not fluctuate with market conditions. Organizers claim the tax is jeopardizing their industry, and they demand immediate action.
Humboldt County's Measure S tax is a marijuana cultivation tax of $1, $2, and $3 a square foot. And for the record, cannabis businesses do pay taxes. They pay taxes on their taxes because the federal government prohibits cannabis businesses from writing off everyday expenses that all other companies can use. Their lands were reassessed and increased property taxes are paid directly to the county. Now we are asking our community to give us a lifeline by suspending Measure S to continue our efforts to be upstanding and contributing members of our society.
Joining us now via Zoom is the Humboldt County Growers Alliance Executive Director Natalynne Delapp and Dylan Mattole from Mattole Valley Sungrown. Thanks for joining us. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay,
I can hear you.
Okay, that's a partial victory, so we're already halfway there. Thank you guys for agreeing to meet with us here tonight on Zoom. Let's start with the basics about Measure S. What is it exactly, and how does it impact cannabis cultivators?
So how about I start with that, and I'll talk about what it is, and then Dylan can talk about the impact.
Excellent.
And so Measure S was enacted by voters in November of 2016. It is a $1, $2, and $3 a square foot cultivation tax. It is paid by farmers based on the type of cultivation that they have. It is also a flat rate tax, so farmers have to pay it regardless as to what happens with their crop throughout that year. So maybe I'll turn it over to Dylan.
Sure, Dylan. What are the impacts from Measure S on farmers like yourself?
Well, as a cultivator, it's as Natalynne mentioned, this is an entitlement tax, which means this is not a tax based on our actual production or our sales or any such measurement. It's a tax which we pay for the right to cultivate. So it has a direct impact on us at the beginning of each season prior to our beginning cultivation. It's something that hits the bottom line right out of the gates, and it is very impactful to our businesses.
Yeah. Now, one of the things, it seems like there was an assumption made that people who were going to be growing marijuana or growing cannabis were going to be so flush with cash because it's obviously a moneymaker that they were always going to have the money to pay this. But that's not necessarily the case, right? I mean, there's been a lot of issues with the cannabis market, and things aren't as rosy as they may have at first seemed. Is that correct?
Correct. So for the last almost 18 months, but really in this last year, there started to be a dramatic drop in the overall wholesale price for cannabis. And that is mostly attached to statewide overproduction. And basically the state of California has authorized it has licensed more cannabis cultivation in California than the California market can consume. And so simple supply and demand economics means that as more cannabis enters the market, the price goes down. But going all the way back to when this tax was written, which was started to be imagined in early 2015 and then voted on in 2016, that was before the state's legalization initiatives, and that was before the state developed a tax strategy. And back in 2015, 2016, the price of cannabis was also propped up by prohibition.
So now, is it the case that you're being double taxed both at the county level and the state level, Dylan?
We're being taxed a lot of ways. I don't know if I'd consider it just double tax, but
okay.
We pay flat rate taxes to Humboldt County for the right to cultivate, and then as we produce and sell, we pay a flat rate tax per pound on our product as it's sold, and that is, of course, in addition to all the what I would call normal taxes that we pay. Payroll tax, income tax, federal income tax, land tax. Like any other business, we deal with taxes which are to be expected. The tax at hand, which we're bringing to the public's attention, is a special tax, this entitlement tax, as it's called.
Yeah. Now, so what are you guys requesting that the Board of Supervisors do to help relieve the industry?
So what we're asking for is our cultivation taxes are paid in 2 installments, one in March and one in October. And last year in the fall, the county gave authorization to farmers to pay their taxes late without being penalized. And so what has happened is farmers are facing a balloon payment of 2 tax bills. One is due in March and one is due by the end of May.
Okay.
And so that balloon payment is really impacting the farmers. And so they need to have that cash up front to be able to start their cultivation cycle and cultivation season. What we are asking for is for the supervisors to forgive the October payment, waive the March 15th payment, and then suspend the tax for an additional year, which will give our community time to come together and go through an open, transparent, and robust public process to develop a new tax strategy that would go back before the voters.
That's what sort of complicates this, is that it wasn't a supervisorial decision to institute the tax, it was voter approved. What do you think the voters didn't know when this tax was approved that maybe they should have known?
Well, the voters gave the supervisors the power to amend, repeal, or reduce the tax.
Okay. Because
when the tax was written, it was very early on. Humboldt County was one of the first jurisdictions in the state to develop a tax measure. And it did go through a public process. This did not come from a citizen initiative. It was a supervisor public process that developed the tax that then went and was approved by the voters.
Okay. Now, Dylan, I mean, we're talking about this tax, and obviously it would be relief to suspend this into the future and possibly redesign something that would be maybe more, sympathetic to the plight of growers. But Overall, what are the issues that are making things so difficult? I mean, you mentioned the fact that there's so many permits for growers in the state, which is one issue. I know that you can't sell out of state, which is obviously probably another issue because it limits the market that you can reach. But what do you think the state or the county could do that would make things more friendly economically for people in your industry?
Well, there's really three major state policy issues that we're struggling with right now. One of them is the oversupply, and the oversupply issue comes from a fact, as Natalynne mentioned, that the state has no limit on cultivation and the amount of acreage that is permitted. And when Prop 64 was passed by the voters of California, there was a promise of some protections for the existing medical industry, which already had been functioning in California for, as 215 for some time, and obviously decades before that. So there was a 1 acre cap that was initially expected to be in the regulation, and that was lifted. So that opened up the door to unlimited production. Another big state policy issue is that in order to get Prop 64 across the line, there were some deals made, and one of them was to allow local jurisdictions to continue to have an outright ban on a prohibition on any form of cannabis, including retail. So we currently have a situation in California where, by some estimates, over 60, almost 70% of the state does not allow any retail. So that limits our ability to get our product out to the large California market. Yeah. And then third, we have these flat rate taxes, which don't fluctuate with the market. I think there was an assumption at the time of both our Measure S and Prop 64, pounds of marijuana were selling for around $1,500. So, there was this $150 approximate 10% tax that was imposed at sale. But of course, now we're dealing with wholesale prices, which are $300 to $500. Yet the tax actually has increased due to moving with inflation. So we're now at $161 per pound that is sold. So these are serious challenges.
Do you feel that the state and the county governments are listening to these larger issues, or are they mostly numb to the whole thing?
Well, I think the state is listening. I think it's hard to ignore at this point. Our governor has put into his budget that he would like to see tax reform in cannabis, although they haven't spelled out what that would be. But as far as Prop 64, most of the changes to that law would need to go back to the general voting public of California, where here locally with Measure S, we do have a situation where the voters of Humboldt County gave our supervisors the ability to amend, repeal, or suspend the tax as long as it does not increase the effect of the tax. Yeah. So that's where we're at today.
Yeah. Now, when you talk about the community coming together to design a more equitable tax, from the outset, from the starting gate, what direction do you think that would take the tax in? Is there a starting point in your negotiations that you think would be a good place to go?
I mean, I think that in the interest of public process, really what we need is to bring our community together. Whether that is a gross receipts kind of tax that's based on production or whether it remains in a square footage, I don't know. We need an analysis, we need reports, we need research, and the public needs to be able to come together to weigh these ideas and make decisions. So, I don't want to put the cart before the horse. But, with the proper people at the table, then I think that we can come up with something that's going to work for both the farming community as well as the taxpayers and the community at large.
Doubling back to an answer a moment ago, there was, you mentioned that there's a glut in the market, and then there was the acre cap, and then that got done away with, and there's also a large number of permits. Where is the glut coming from? Is it coming from there being a lot of large-scale operations, or because there's a lot of smaller grows and there's just too many?
I think it's a nuanced question, but I think that we have to come back to the fact that a large part of California market has not been opened up yet. So when we look at the glut of product, certainly we do have a what would probably be an excessive amount of cultivation in the state right now, but we also are only dealing with about 30% of our state where we're able to sell. So, we need the market to open up here in California so we can really see where the market is. But Humboldt County has about 1,000 licensed cultivators, independent farms, independent businesses, and we have the largest number of cultivators in the state, but there is a massive amount of production in the southern and central part of our state.
Yeah. One of the things that you mentioned at the demonstration was that you have to pay the taxes, but then you don't have some of the advantages that are afforded to other tax-paying businesses, like being able to itemize and deduct things. Can you explain how that also disadvantages cannabis growers?
Yes. Well, first of all, we have very limited access to banking. We actually do not have access to traditional banking. So we are fortunate that we have local credit unions that have opened up some banking options for us for cash flow. But when it comes to any sort of financing, bank loans, credit lines, as you'd find with a lot of businesses, such in agriculture specifically, where you run a credit line through the production season and then pay it back during sales periods, we have no ability to access any of that financing. When it comes to our taxes, we all pay federal income taxes and California state income taxes. On the federal side, we file under special rules, which are called 280E, which do not allow us to take normal itemized deductions from our expenses. So, as it's often said, we actually pay taxes on our taxes because of the fact that we don't get our normal write-offs.
Now, just to make sure it's clear for the viewers, the reason why you guys can't access banking and regular business financing is because it's still illegal federally, right?
Correct.
So, this is sort of a kind of a beyond the Ken question, but would national legalization make your lives a lot simpler, or would that further complicate, things from your end?
I think the devil's always in the details of what does the legislation say? Does the legislation create a new complicated tax structure? California has really been a front runner in developing cannabis policy. Some of it's very complicated and not always great, but there are protections in place that have developed. Specifically, we have county of origin protections, like Humboldt County, the name in our county and the product grown in this region is protected. But if the federal government does not integrate that intellectual property and name protection, we're going to be swimming upstream, like in the wrong direction. So, we need whatever is happening on the federal level, which there are currently 2 different bills that are competing, that are being discussed. One has more taxes, one has less taxes. So, what happens with that legislation over the next year or 2 or 3 and where it goes, opening up interstate commerce would be certainly helpful. Being able to have access to banking would be great.
What kind of efforts are being made to open up the state of California? Is there any kind of effort to go to these resistant counties and try to get their supervisors to open up, or how does that happen?
I often talk to some of our local elected people and ask, when you talk to other electeds from other regions, that's a great place to start. City of Eureka has done a lot of work and has really embraced cannabis, as has Arcata, and Humboldt County. So, I ask our elected officials to do their job and talk with other elected officials and talk about, what are the benefits that can be brought to their communities if they open this up.
Dylan, what would you say would be the worst case scenario if this Measure S tax is not suspended in the short term?
Well, I think that the most immediate fallout will be that we're going to see a loss of a large number of our local businesses. Yeah. As I said before, we have right around 1,000 independent farms right now, and I can tell you that I talk daily to to us, friends, associates. These are families. These are your neighbors who right now are looking at Measure S payments as maybe just that final cut that's going to put them out this year, and they're not going to continue to stay in business. So, I would anticipate that, there is a large number. It's full speculation as far as how many of these farms would go out of business. But I think that when these farms do go out of business, it's not just the immediate family that farm is supporting. Most of us farms employ people. We pay on average a far better than living wage. And so there will be a ripple effect. We employ independent contractors, we employ contractors, we buy products in our community. We all shop locally for the most part. We support many local businesses. And so I think there will absolutely be a ripple effect through our local economy. It's not just our businesses going out of business. It's the effect that it will have on the greater community.
And a lot of these are family farms, right? I mean, they've been in business for sometimes generations, and it's not just a fly-by-night kind of overnight operation. These things have been around for decades, some of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And we started with a lot more farms in this process, and we're down to about 1,000. So, we've already had a high level of attrition of people who wanted to come into compliance and started the process and were unable for many reasons to get there. So, we're kind of dealing now with the 1,000 of us that made it, that had the ability to get this far. And I'd hate to see any more loss of local businesses.
Yeah. Natalynne, we have 1 minute left roughly, and real quick, I just wanted to find out if people were in support of this endeavor. You mentioned that there was going to be a hearing in February before the Board of Supervisors. Is that right? Could you give us a date and what people might be able to do to support you?
Awesome. So on Tuesday, February 1st, the Board of Supervisors is hearing an agenda item to discuss Measure S. If people are interested, definitely tune in. I really appreciate that they still have the Zoom call so people can tune in. Our website is suspendmeasures.com if people are interested in learning more.
Excellent, guys. Thank you so much. As this goes forward, I'd love to have you back on the show to keep us updated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll be right back after this short break.
The field, he could do it all.
The greatest right fielder in the game of baseball, Roberto Clemente.
But off it, he endured racism and ridicule.
There's a man who standing up for what is right. They weren't ready for Roberto Clemente.
The story of a legend whose greatness transcended sports.
He is one of those iconic figures that lift the spirits.
Roberto Clemente on American Experience.
The Maya built great cities.
Terraces, road systems, it's a perfect planned city.
And then abandoned them. Can new discoveries reveal why?
And then, bam, we have these huge deposits.
It is completely unique. There's nothing like it.
There's a history behind those artifacts, a culture we want to know better. The Maya are still here.
Ancient Maya Metropolis on Nova.
I'm going to watch the heck out of that show. Anyway, as Omicron continues to spread like wildfire across Humboldt County, officials this week advised prioritizing tests for those people suffering from actual symptoms. The federal government, meanwhile, took steps this week to make sure more tests are available to those who need them. KEET contributor Ryan Hutson has more.
As the COVID-19 Omicron surge continues to throttle Humboldt County, Health Officer Dr. Ian Hoffman warns that cases on a 7-day average may continue to rise because we have not reached the peak of this surge yet. He explains at this week's press conference.
I know that Omicron is fast moving, it's highly contagious, and it's definitely here based on the numbers, widespread. So, I think the big take home is if you're having trouble finding supplies, know that you're not alone. This is happening everywhere. But if we need to prioritize, we should really be prioritizing those who are sick to find out if they have, COVID or some other colds that are certainly circulating in our community right now. The federal government just opened up a website to allow for each household to order 4 tests, and that's something that would encourage everyone to go utilize immediately. That's at covidtests.gov. And then many of our community can access testing at school sites through, kids who are at schools, if their schools are doing testing. Some have been given at-home tests, and so those can be utilized for those students who receive the test.
According to the California Department of Public Health, people who test positive with symptoms regardless of vaccination status should isolate for 5 full days after the start of symptoms. The 5-day countdown begins on either the first day after symptoms or the first day after a person tests positive. Public Health's advice to local businesses:
we're now really sort of moving towards anyone who had potential exposure. So anyone in that group who is in the same space as that person could just get tested again if they had that exposure, would be the best way to slow this thing down and utilize those plentiful resources. If they are limited, you would want to utilize those for your workers who were symptomatic so that you could identify a positive, exclude them, and even potentially bring them back, earlier if they were on a 5-day isolation, had the ability to get out early from that, or people who might have had a high exposure, you could get them out of quarantine earlier on day 5 with that test. So different scenarios, just depends on, again, the availability and how many tests are accessible to that business.
Reporting for Headline Humboldt, this is Ryan Hutson.
State Senator Mike McGuire was elevated this week to the position of Senate Majority Leader, becoming the second highest ranking Democrat in the state Senate and increasing his power in government. McGuire was named to the position by the Senate President Pro Tem Tony Atkins. Together, Atkins and McGuire will work together in the coming months to lead the California Senate. McGuire's priorities will include action on climate change, affordable housing, wildfire resilience, and homelessness. For the last 3 years, Senator McGuire has served as Assistant Majority Leader. Quote, "We have been through so much together over these last several years, multiple wildfires, floods, extreme drought, and this pandemic. Even through our darkest days, we never gave up and we never gave in. Together, we will never quit fighting for the future of the North Coast and the Golden State." That sounds like a good message to end our show on tonight. That's all our time for this evening. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for caring about our community. Stay tuned, stay informed.